The fluorescent lights of Los Angeles International Airport cast their harsh glow across Terminal 4 as the usual chaos of one of the world's busiest airports unfolded on a typical Tuesday afternoon in October 2002. Flight delays, crying children, stressed travelers rushing to make connections, and the constant hum of announcements in multiple languages created the familiar symphony of modern air travel. Among the thousands of passengers navigating the terminal that day, Ozzy Osbourne was hoping for nothing more than a quiet journey home to England, following a grueling 3-month North American tour. At 53, Ozzy was beginning to feel his age in ways that concerned both him and his family. The tour had been physically demanding. His voice was strained from months of performing, and the tremor in his hands, which would later be diagnosed as Parkinson's disease, was becoming more noticeable when he was tired or stressed. All he wanted was to board his first-class flight to London, sleep for 10 hours, and spend some quiet time with Sharon recovering from what had been one of the most intense touring schedules of his career. But as he made his way through the terminal, wheeling a small carry-on bag and wearing dark sunglasses and a baseball cap in a futile attempt to maintain some anonymity, Ozzy quickly realized that his hopes for a peaceful departure were about to be shattered. Word of his presence had somehow leaked, and a pack of paparazzi photographers had assembled near his gate, their cameras ready, and their aggressive questioning already beginning to disrupt the normal flow of airport traffic. If you're enjoying this incredible story, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. It helps us bring you more amazing moments that show the real character of celebrities under pressure. The group consisted of about 8 photographers, led by a particularly aggressive freelancer named Rick Morrison, who had built his reputation on getting provocative shots of celebrities in compromising or unflattering situations. Morrison specialized in the kind of invasive photography that pushed legal boundaries and often crossed ethical lines, creating confrontational situations designed to capture dramatic reactions that would sell for premium prices to tabloid magazines. "Ozzy! Ozzy!" Morrison called out as soon as he spotted the rock star. "How do you feel about the rumors that you're planning to retire? Is it true that your health is forcing you to quit touring?" The questions were designed to be inflammatory, based on unsubstantiated gossip, and calculated to provoke either anger or revealing statements. Morrison and his colleagues began following Ozzy through the terminal, their cameras clicking constantly, their shouted questions becoming increasingly personal and invasive. "Ozzy, what's wrong with your hands? Are you developing a drinking problem again? Is Sharon worried about your health?" Other travelers in the terminal began to stop and stare, some pulling out their own cameras to document the celebrity sighting, others looking annoyed at the disruption to their travel plans. Airport security was beginning to take notice, but they were hesitant to intervene in what appeared to be a legal, if obnoxious, journalistic activity. Ozzy continued walking toward his gate, his jaw set in determination as he tried to ignore the increasingly hostile questions and the constant flash of cameras. But the photographers were relentless, surrounding him in a moving circle that made normal movement difficult and created a spectacle that was drawing more and more attention from other passengers. "Come on, Ozzy, give us something," Morrison pressed, stepping directly into Ozzy's path. "The fans want to know what's really going on with you. Are you sick? Are you broke? Is your marriage in trouble?" It was the marriage question that finally stopped Ozzy in his tracks. For over 20 years, Sharon had been not just his wife, but his manager, his anchor, and his greatest support through every crisis and triumph. The suggestion that their relationship was troubled was both completely false and deeply offensive to him. Ozzy stopped walking and slowly turned to face Morrison and the pack of photographers who had been pursuing him. For a moment, the terminal around them seemed to quiet as other travelers sensed that something significant was about to happen. "You want to know what's really going on with me?" Ozzy said, his voice calm but carrying clearly through the terminal space. "I'll tell you exactly what's going on." "Oh." Morrison's eyes lit up with anticipation, thinking he was about to get the kind of explosive quote that would make his story worth thousands of dollars. "What's going on?" Ozzy continued, his voice growing stronger. "Is that I just finished a 3-month tour where I performed for over 500,000 people who paid their hard-earned money to hear music that means something to them. What's going on is that I'm tired, and I want to go home to my wife and family." The photographers continued clicking their cameras, but something in Ozzy's tone was beginning to make them uncomfortable. This wasn't the angry outburst or defensive denial they had been hoping for. "What's going on?" Ozzy said, taking a step closer to Morrison. "Is that I'm a human being who deserves the same basic respect that any other person would expect when they're trying to travel home after a long trip." By now, a crowd had gathered around the confrontation, but instead of the usual rubbernecking curiosity, the atmosphere was becoming tense in a different way. Other travelers were beginning to look at the photographers with disapproval rather than excitement. "But you want to know what's really going on here?" Ozzy asked, his voice now carrying an edge of controlled anger. "What's really going on is that 8 grown men are harassing someone in an airport, disrupting other people's travel, and asking invasive questions about personal matters that are none of their business." Morrison tried to interrupt with another question, but Ozzy held up his hand. "I'm not finished," he said firmly. "What's going on is that you're doing this not because the public has a right to know about my marriage or my health, but because you think you can make money by invading my privacy and creating a spectacle." The crowd around them was growing larger, and airport security was finally beginning to move toward the situation. But what happened next surprised everyone, including Ozzy himself. Instead of continuing his confrontation with the photographers, Ozzy turned away from them and addressed the crowd of travelers who had gathered to watch. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to commanding large audiences, "I apologize for this disruption to your travel day. You're probably wondering why 8 men with cameras are following one person around an airport asking personal questions." The crowd was now completely focused on Ozzy, hanging on his every word. "These men are paparazzi photographers," he explained, gesturing toward Morrison and his colleagues. "They make their living by taking pictures of celebrities in situations that are designed to be embarrassing, unflattering, or controversial. They're not journalists seeking important information. They're creating entertainment content for tabloid magazines." Morrison looked increasingly uncomfortable as Ozzy continued his impromptu airport lecture. "Now, I'm not saying this because I think I'm more important than anyone else," Ozzy continued. "I'm saying it because I want you to understand what you're witnessing here. This is what harassment looks like. This is what it means to have your privacy invaded for someone else's profit." He paused, looking around at the faces in the crowd, many of whom were nodding in understanding. "The reason I'm telling you this," Ozzy said, "is because someday one of you might be going through a difficult time, a divorce, a health scare, a family crisis, and you might find people with cameras following you around, asking invasive questions, and trying to profit from your pain." The crowd was now completely silent, captivated by this unexpected perspective on celebrity culture and media ethics. "When that happens," Ozzy continued, "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that being in the public eye doesn't mean giving up your right to basic human dignity. And I want you to remember that just because someone has cameras and claims to be seeking information doesn't mean they have the right to harass you." Morrison made one last attempt to regain control of the situation. "Ozzy, this is how the entertainment industry works. Celebrities benefit from publicity, so—" "No," Ozzy interrupted firmly, turning back to face the photographer. "This is not how the entertainment industry works. This is how parasites work." The directness of the statement drew gasps from several people in the crowd. "The entertainment industry," Ozzy continued, "is about creating music, making films, writing books, performing on stage. What you do isn't part of the entertainment industry. It's predatory behavior that feeds off the entertainment industry." He walked closer to Morrison, his presence now completely dominating the space. "I've spent 30 years creating music that people love, touring the world to perform for fans, and working to entertain people. What have you created? What have you contributed to anyone's life except stress, invasion of privacy, and tabloid gossip?" Morrison was now visibly sweating, clearly unprepared for this level of articulate confrontation. "You make your living by making other people's lives more difficult," Ozzy continued. "You contribute nothing positive to the world. You create no art, provide no service, help no one. You're parasites feeding off other people's actual accomplishments." The crowd was now openly hostile toward the photographers, with several people expressing agreement with Ozzy's assessment. "But here's what I want you to understand," Ozzy said, addressing both the photographers and the crowd. "I'm not angry because you're bothering me. I'm angry because this kind of behavior has become normalized in our society. We've created a culture where invading people's privacy and harassing them for entertainment is considered acceptable. Airport security had finally arrived, but they held back, sensing that this situation was resolving itself in an unexpected way. We've created a culture, Ozzy continued, where people think they have the right to know intimate details about strangers' lives, where we turn other people's pain and struggles into entertainment, where we reward the people who are willing to cross ethical lines to feed our curiosity. He looked around at the crowd, many of whom were now looking thoughtful rather than simply entertained. And that's not just a problem for celebrities, he added. That's a problem for everyone. Because when we normalize harassment and invasion of privacy for famous people, we make it easier to justify the same behavior toward anyone. Morrison made one final attempt to ask a question, but Ozzy simply shook his head. I'm done talking to you, he said calmly. You've heard everything I have to say. The question now is whether you're going to continue following me around this airport, harassing other travelers and disrupting people's day, or whether you're going to act like responsible adults and leave me alone. What happened next was remarkable. One by one, the photographers began to lower their cameras and step back. The combination of Ozzy's articulate dismantling of their behavior, the crowd's obvious disapproval, and the presence of airport security had completely deflated their aggressive energy. Morrison, clearly defeated, gathered his equipment and walked away without another word. The other photographers followed, their planned harassment session having backfired spectacularly. As the crowd began to disperse, several people approached Ozzy to thank him for what he had said. A businesswoman told him that his comments about privacy and harassment had given her a new perspective on celebrity culture. A college student said he was inspired by Ozzy's refusal to be bullied or intimidated. But the most meaningful interaction came from an elderly man who had been watching the entire confrontation from a nearby bench. Son, the man said, approaching Ozzy with a gentle smile. I don't know your music, and I don't know much about the entertainment business, but what you just did, standing up to those bullies and explaining why their behavior was wrong, that was the most impressive thing I've seen in a long time. Thank you, Ozzy replied, genuinely touched by the man's words. You turned what could have been an ugly situation into a teaching moment, the man continued. You didn't lose your temper, you didn't sink to their level, and you helped everyone here understand something important about respect and human dignity. As Ozzy finally made his way to his gate, he reflected on what had just happened. What had started as a typical paparazzi harassment session had become something entirely different. A public discussion about media ethics, privacy rights, and the responsibility we all have to treat each other with basic respect. The incident was captured on multiple phones and cameras, and within hours, videos of Ozzy's airport speech were circulating online. But unlike typical paparazzi footage, which focuses on creating embarrassing or controversial moments, these videos showed something different. A thoughtful, articulate defense of human dignity and a critique of predatory media behavior. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Fans praised Ozzy not just for standing up to the photographers, but for the way he had done it, with intelligence, dignity, and genuine concern for broader social issues. Media ethics professors began using the incident as a case study in their classes, and several journalism organizations cited it as an example of the difference between legitimate reporting and invasive harassment. Morrison, meanwhile, found his reputation severely damaged by the incident. Several publications refused to buy his photos, citing the negative publicity associated with his confrontational methods. Other celebrities began refusing to work with any outlet that used his services, and he eventually had to leave the paparazzi business entirely. But perhaps the most significant impact was on how other celebrities began handling similar situations. Ozzy's approach, turning harassment into a teaching moment, maintaining dignity while firmly setting boundaries, and using the situation to educate rather than simply defend, became a model for how public figures could respond to invasive media behavior. Years later, when journalism students studied the incident, they noted how Ozzy had completely reframed the situation. Instead of playing the role of victim or aggressor, he had become an educator, using the confrontation as an opportunity to help both the photographers and the bystanders understand the broader implications of their behavior and attitudes. That day at LAX taught me something important, Ozzy would later reflect in interviews. I realized that sometimes the most powerful response to being attacked isn't to attack back. It's to help people understand why the attack was wrong in the first place. The incident became known as the LAX lecture, and it remained one of the most watched celebrity confrontation videos on early internet platforms. But unlike most such videos, which were watched for their entertainment value, this one was shared because of its educational content and its demonstration of how to maintain dignity under pressure. The video was eventually used in conflict resolution training, media ethics courses, and even airport security training as an example of how calm, articulate communication could defuse potentially explosive situations. For Ozzy, the incident marked a turning point in how he approached his public life. He realized that his platform as a celebrity could be used not just for entertainment, but for education and social commentary. The skills he had developed as a performer, commanding an audience, speaking clearly and passionately, connecting with people's emotions, could be powerful tools for addressing important social issues. In subsequent years, he began speaking more openly about topics like mental health, addiction recovery, and media responsibility, using his fame as a platform for promoting understanding and positive change rather than just entertainment. The paparazzi thought they were going to get photos of me looking angry or out of control, Ozzy said in a later interview. Instead, they ended up documenting a moment when I found my voice on issues that matter. In a way, they did me a favor. They gave me a chance to show people that there's a better way to handle conflict, and that celebrities have a responsibility to use their platforms wisely. The LAX lecture became legendary, not because it was dramatic or controversial, but because it demonstrated how intelligence, dignity, and genuine concern for others could transform even the most hostile situations into opportunities for growth and understanding. The immediate aftermath of the incident was unlike anything anyone at the airport had experienced. As the photographers retreated and the crowd began to disperse, several passengers approached Ozzy not for autographs or selfies, but to thank him for what they had just witnessed. Many expressed that his response had given them a new perspective on celebrity culture, media ethics, and their own role as consumers of entertainment news. Linda Martinez, a social worker from Phoenix who had been waiting for a connecting flight, told Ozzy that his handling of the situation reminded her of conflict resolution techniques she used in her professional work. "You didn't just defend yourself," she said. "You helped everyone understand why the behavior was wrong and what the broader implications were. That's exactly how you create lasting change." Dr. James Patterson, a journalism professor from UCLA who happened to be traveling through LAX, approached Ozzy with a business card. "Mr. Osbourne, I teach media ethics, and what you just demonstrated was a masterclass in public communication. Would you ever consider speaking to my students about the relationship between celebrities and the press?" The invitation surprised Ozzy, but it also intrigued him. The idea that his experience could be educational rather than just entertaining was appealing in a way he hadn't expected. "I might be interested in that," he told Dr. Patterson. "I've been thinking a lot lately about how I can use my platform for something more meaningful than just music." Meanwhile, Airport Security Chief Michael Roberts was reviewing the incident with his staff. Unlike typical celebrity confrontations, which usually required intervention and sometimes arrests, this situation had resolved itself through communication and education. Roberts made a note to use video footage of the incident in future training sessions as an example of how verbal de-escalation could be more effective than physical intervention. "What we saw today," Roberts told his team during their debriefing, "was a masterclass in how to handle a hostile situation without escalating it into violence or chaos. Mr. Osbourne turned a potential security nightmare into a learning experience for everyone involved." The videos of the confrontation began appearing online within hours, but their spread followed an unusual pattern. Instead of being shared primarily for entertainment value, as most celebrity confrontation videos were, these clips were being shared by journalism professors, conflict resolution specialists, and social media users who wanted to highlight examples of effective communication under pressure. Dr. Sarah Chen, a media studies professor at Stanford, was among the first academics to recognize the significance of what had happened. She published a blog post that evening titled, "The LAX Lecture, When Celebrities Become Educators," which analyzed how Ozzy had used his platform to address broader social issues rather than simply defending himself. What Mr. Osbourne did today represents a fundamental shift in how public figures can respond to media harassment, Dr. Chen wrote. Instead of playing the victim or the aggressor, he became a teacher, using the confrontation as a case study in media ethics and human dignity. This approach not only defended his own rights, but educated everyone present about the broader issues at stake. The blog post was shared thousands of times within 24 hours, sparking discussions in academic circles about the role of celebrities in public discourse and the potential for entertainment figures to contribute to social education. Rick Morrison, meanwhile, was experiencing the professional consequences of his confrontational approach. The video footage clearly showed him as the aggressor, asking invasive personal questions and creating a hostile environment in a public space. Several publications that had previously purchased his photographs began distancing themselves from his work. Celebrity gossip magazine, Star Tracker, issued a statement saying they would no longer purchase photographs obtained through aggressive or harassing methods. Editor-in-chief Janet Williams explained, "The LAX incident made us realize that we have a responsibility to consider how our content is obtained. We want celebrity news, but not at the expense of basic human decency." Other paparazzi photographers in Los Angeles began feeling the impact as well. Several celebrities' representatives sent letters to gossip publications stating that their clients would refuse all interviews and promotional opportunities with any outlet that continued to use Morrison's services or similar aggressive tactics. The incident also caught the attention of civil rights organizations. The American Civil Liberties Union issued a statement praising Ozzy's response and calling for stronger protections against harassment in public spaces. While we understand that public figures have reduced privacy expectations, what we witnessed at LAX crossed the line from journalism into harassment, said ACLU spokesperson David Rodriguez. Mr. Osbourne's response highlighted the importance of maintaining human dignity regardless of someone's celebrity status. 3 days after the incident, Ozzy received an unexpected phone call from someone who identified himself as Tom Bradley, a recently retired flight attendant who had witnessed the entire confrontation. "Mr. Osbourne," Bradley said, "I've been working at LAX for 30 years, and I've seen hundreds of celebrity encounters. What you did the other day was extraordinary, and I wanted you to know how it affected one of the other passengers." Bradley went on to explain that he had been working the gate area when the confrontation occurred and had noticed a teenage girl who had been watching the entire incident with intense interest. After Ozzy left, the girl had approached Bradley and asked if he knew how to contact Ozzy's representatives. "Her name is Jessica Morgan," Bradley explained. "She's 16, and she told me that watching you handle those photographers gave her the courage to stand up to some bullies at her school who had been harassing her. She wanted to thank you for showing her that you don't have to fight or get angry to defend yourself effectively." The story moved Ozzy deeply. The idea that his response to the paparazzi had somehow helped a teenager deal with bullying was more meaningful to him than any positive review or sales figure he had ever received. "Could you help me get in touch with her?" Ozzy asked. "I'd like to send her a note." Through Bradley's assistance, Ozzy was able to send Jessica a handwritten letter encouraging her to continue standing up for herself and others, using intelligence and dignity rather than aggression. The letter sparked a correspondence that lasted several years, with Jessica eventually crediting Ozzy's example with helping her develop the confidence to become a peer mediator at her school and later study conflict resolution in college. A week after the LAX incident, Dr. Patterson followed up on his invitation by officially requesting that Ozzy speak to his media ethics class at UCLA. The invitation came with an offer to pay Ozzy's standard speaking fee, but Ozzy declined the payment and agreed to appear for free. "I've been thinking about what happened at the airport," Ozzy told Dr. Patterson during their planning conversation. "I realized that I learned as much from that experience as anyone else did. I'd like to explore these ideas further with your students." The lecture, scheduled for 3 weeks later, was originally planned for Dr. Patterson's regular classroom of about 30 students. But word of Ozzy's appearance spread quickly through the journalism and media studies departments, and the event was moved to a 200-seat auditorium to accommodate demand. The lecture itself became another landmark moment in Ozzy's evolving role as a social commentator. Rather than simply recounting the airport incident, he used it as a starting point for a broader discussion about celebrity culture, media responsibility, and the impact of entertainment news on both public figures and society as a whole. What happened at LAX wasn't really about me, Ozzy told the packed auditorium. It was about how we've normalized certain behaviors in our society that we shouldn't accept. We've created a culture where invading people's privacy for entertainment is considered not just acceptable, but profitable. He spoke about his own evolution, from someone who had often courted controversy for publicity purposes, to someone who was beginning to understand the responsibility that came with his platform and influence. When I was younger, I thought any attention was good attention, he admitted. I did outrageous things because they got me noticed, because they sold records, because they kept my name in the headlines. But what I didn't consider was the broader impact of that approach. The students were captivated by his honesty and insight. Many had expected a typical celebrity appearance, entertaining stories and promotional material, but instead they were getting a thoughtful analysis of media culture from someone who had lived it from the inside. The paparazzi at the airport were operating under the assumption that because I had courted publicity in the past, I had somehow forfeited my right to basic respect and privacy, Ozzy continued. But that's not how human rights work. You don't lose your humanity by becoming famous. During the question and answer session, a journalism student asked Ozzy how he thought reporters should balance the public's interest in celebrity news with respect for individual privacy. That's the right question, Ozzy replied. The key is understanding the difference between public interest and public curiosity. Is the information you're seeking actually important to society, or is it just satisfying people's nosiness? Is your method of obtaining information ethical, or are you causing harm for the sake of entertainment? He used his own experience to illustrate the point. If I were running for political office, my health might be a matter of public interest. If I were advocating for policies related to family values, my marriage might be relevant to public discourse. But when I'm just trying to catch a flight home after a tour, my personal life isn't anyone's business but mine and my family's. The lecture was recorded and later made available online, where it was viewed hundreds of thousands of times by journalism students, media professionals, and members of the general public interested in media ethics. Several journalism schools began incorporating the lecture into their curricula as an example of how subjects of media coverage might view and experience journalistic practices. Following the UCLA lecture, Ozzy began receiving invitations to speak at other universities, media, conferences, and professional journalism events. What had started as a spontaneous response to harassment was evolving into a new dimension of his public career. At the National Association of Television Program Executives Annual Conference 6 months later, Ozzy delivered a keynote address about the entertainment industry's responsibility to consider the human impact of its content. He spoke about the difference between entertainment that elevated and inspired people versus content that exploited and degraded them. The entertainment industry has incredible power to influence how people think, feel, and behave, he told the audience of television executives and producers. With that power comes responsibility. We can choose to create content that brings out the best in people, or we can choose to create content that appeals to their worst impulses. The speech was particularly impactful because it came from someone who had been both a creator and a target of controversial entertainment content. Ozzy's perspective as both an insider and a victim of certain industry practices gave his words particular weight with the audience. The ripple effects of the LAX incident continued to spread through the entertainment industry. Several major talent agencies began including paparazzi harassment protocols in their client contracts, establishing clear boundaries about what kinds of photography and interviews their clients would and wouldn't participate in. CAA, Creative Artists Agency, issued new guidelines stating that they would not book their clients with any publication or program that used aggressive, invasive, or harassing methods to obtain content. Other major agencies quickly followed suit, creating industry-wide pressure for more ethical media practices. The incident also influenced legal developments. California State Senator Maria Gonzalez introduced legislation inspired by the LAX confrontation that would strengthen penalties for harassment of individuals in airports and other public transportation facilities. The Dignity in Transit Act passed unanimously and was later adopted as a model by other states. What we saw in that airport video was a clear example of behavior that crosses the line from journalism into harassment, Senator Gonzalez explained during the bill's introduction. Mr. Osbourne's response showed us that we can address these issues through education and legal protections, rather than just accepting them as inevitable. Meanwhile, Rick Morrison was experiencing the full consequences of his confrontational approach. Several of his former clients had terminated their relationships with him, and new clients were increasingly difficult to find. The negative publicity from the LAX incident had made him essentially unemployable in the Los Angeles paparazzi market. Morrison eventually left the photography business entirely and took a job in retail sales. In a rare interview 3 years later, he reflected on the incident and its impact on his life. "I thought I was just doing my job," Morrison said. "But watching that video afterwards, seeing how aggressive and invasive I was being, I realized that I had lost sight of the fact that celebrities are human beings." Mr. Osbourne didn't just call me out. He helped me understand that what I was doing was wrong. The transformation in Morrison's perspective was genuine, and he eventually became an advocate for more ethical practices in entertainment journalism. He began speaking at journalism schools about the importance of maintaining professional standards and respect for subjects, using his own negative experience as a cautionary tale. 2 years after the LAX incident, Ozzy was invited to participate in a panel discussion at the Columbia Journalism School alongside several prominent media ethics experts and working journalists. The panel, titled "Celebrity, Privacy, and the Public Interest," drew attendees from across the media industry. During the discussion, Ozzy was asked whether he thought his approach at LAX had been effective in changing industry practices. "I think it started a conversation," he replied, "but real change takes time and consistent effort. The industry is slowly recognizing that there's a difference between legitimate news gathering and exploitation for entertainment." He credited the incident with helping him find his voice on social issues beyond entertainment. "Before LAX, I thought my role was just to make music and entertain people, but that experience taught me that when you have a platform, you have a responsibility to use it thoughtfully." The panel discussion was widely covered in journalism trade publications and helped establish Ozzy as a credible voice in discussions about media ethics and celebrity rights. His evolving role as a social commentator also influenced his music. His 2005 album, Undercover, included several tracks that dealt explicitly with themes of media manipulation, privacy rights, and the responsibility of public figures to use their platforms wisely. The song, Facing Hell, while maintaining Ozzy's signature sound, included lyrics that directly referenced his experience with invasive media coverage. "They want to know your secrets, want to own your pain, turn your private moments into profit and gain. But dignity ain't for sale, and respect can't be bought. Some things are sacred, whether you think so or not." Music critics noted the maturity and social awareness in Ozzy's newer material, with Rolling Stone commenting that Osbourne has evolved from the Prince of Darkness into something more complex and interesting, an elder statesman of rock who uses his platform to address serious social issues. The LAX incident also had unexpected international implications. The video was widely shared in countries where press freedom and celebrity privacy rights were ongoing political issues. In the United Kingdom, where aggressive tabloid journalism had long been a source of public debate, the incident was cited by press reform advocates as an example of how invasive media practices had spread globally. Lord Justice Brian Leveson, who was conducting an inquiry into British press practices at the time, referenced the LAX video during hearings about paparazzi, behavior, and media ethics. "What we see in this American incident," he noted, is both the problem and a potential solution. The problem is journalism that prioritizes sensation over respect for human dignity. The solution is public education and the kind of articulate response we witnessed from Mr. Osbourne. In Australia, where paparazzi harassment of celebrities had become increasingly aggressive, the LAX incident was used by media reform advocates to support legislation strengthening privacy protections. The incident was featured in educational materials used to train both journalists and law enforcement officers about appropriate boundaries in celebrity coverage. 5 years after the incident, Jessica Morgan, the teenager who had been inspired by Ozzy's response to stand up to bullies at her school, graduated from college with a degree in conflict resolution and social work. She sent Ozzy an invitation to her graduation, along with a letter explaining how their correspondence had influenced her career choice. "Your example at the airport showed me that you can stand up to people who are treating you badly without becoming like them," Jessica wrote. "That lesson changed my life and led me to a career helping other people resolve conflicts peacefully." Ozzy attended Jessica's graduation ceremony, where he was recognized by the university for his contributions to conflict resolution education. The recognition was based not just on the LAX incident, but on his ongoing work speaking at schools and conferences about non-violent response to aggression and harassment. During his brief speech at the graduation ceremony, Ozzy reflected on how the chance encounter with harassment had led to unexpected opportunities for positive impact. "6 years ago, I thought some photographers at an airport were just trying to ruin my day," he told the graduating class. "I didn't realize they were giving me a chance to discover a new purpose." Sometimes our worst moments become the foundation for our most meaningful work. The LAX incident also influenced academic research into celebrity culture and media ethics. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had written the initial blog post analyzing the incident, expanded her observations into a full academic study titled "The Educational Potential of Celebrity Conflict: How Public Figures Can Transform Harassment into Social Commentary." The study, published in the Journal of Media Ethics, analyzed how Ozzy's response had differed from typical celebrity reactions to paparazzi harassment and why his approach had been more effective in creating positive social change. "Most celebrities respond to harassment either with anger or with avoidance," Dr. Chen wrote. Mr. Osbourne chose a third option, education. By explaining why the behavior was problematic and what its broader implications were, he transformed a personal attack into a teachable moment that benefited everyone present. The study was widely cited in subsequent research on celebrity culture, media ethics, and public communication strategies. It helped establish the LAX incident as a legitimate subject of academic study rather than just entertainment industry gossip. 10 years after the incident, Ozzy was invited to deliver the keynote address at the annual conference of the Society of Professional Journalists. His speech, titled "From Harassment to Understanding: How One Airport Confrontation Changed My Perspective on Media and Responsibility," drew the largest audience in the conference's history. In his address, Ozzy reflected on how the incident had changed not just his own approach to media interactions, but had contributed to broader changes in industry practices and public awareness. "When I stood up to those photographers 10 years ago, I was just trying to get them to leave me alone," he told the audience of journalists, editors, and media professionals. "I didn't expect it to become a teaching moment or to lead to changes in how the industry operates. But that experience taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is explain why something is wrong, not just that it's wrong." He credited the journalism community with being responsive to the concerns raised by the incident. The media industry has shown that it can evolve and improve when presented with legitimate criticism and clear alternatives. The changes we've seen in paparazzi practices, privacy protections, and ethical guidelines show that journalists and media professionals care about doing their jobs responsibly. The speech was well received by the audience, many of whom credited Ozzy with helping to elevate the discussion about media ethics beyond simple complaints about press coverage to substantive conversations about professional responsibility and social impact. Following the SPJ keynote, Ozzy was approached by several journalism schools about the possibility of establishing a scholarship program for students interested in ethical media practices. Working with Sharon and their foundation, he established the Dignity in Journalism Scholarship, which provided financial support for journalism students who demonstrated commitment to ethical reporting practices and respect for subject privacy. The scholarship program, which began with a modest endowment, grew over the years as other entertainment industry figures contributed to support ethical journalism education. Recipients of the scholarship were required to complete coursework in media ethics and to spend a semester working with organizations focused on privacy rights and conflict resolution. By 2015, more than 200 students had received support through the program, and many had gone on to careers in journalism, where they became advocates for ethical practices and respectful treatment of news subjects. The lasting impact of the LAX incident was perhaps best summarized by Dr. Patterson, the UCLA professor who had first invited Ozzy to speak to his class. In a 2012 retrospective article about the incident, Dr. Patterson wrote, "What made the LAX confrontation significant wasn't the celebrity involved or the dramatic nature of the encounter. What made it significant was the demonstration that public figures have the power to transform negative situations into positive educational opportunities. Mr. Osbourne showed that celebrities don't have to be passive victims of media harassment. They can become active participants in improving media culture." The article noted that the incident had become a standard case study in media ethics courses and had influenced journalism training programs around the world. For Ozzy himself, the LAX incident remained a defining moment in his understanding of celebrity responsibility and the potential for positive impact. In interviews, he often cited it as the experience that taught him to think more carefully about how he used his platform and influence. "Before that day at the airport, I thought fame was just about entertainment," he reflected in a 2020 interview. "But that incident taught me that when you're in the public eye, everything you do can be educational. Your response to conflict, your treatment of others, your willingness to stand up for what's right. That's a big responsibility, but it's also a big opportunity." The LAX lecture, as it came to be known, demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful responses to aggression are not aggressive in return, but educational, thoughtful, and focused on helping others understand larger principles and values. It showed that celebrities could be more than entertainers. They could be teachers, advocates, and voices for positive social change. Thank you for reading this incredible story about dignity, respect, and the power of education over confrontation. If it inspired you, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. It helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of the importance of maintaining our humanity even in difficult situations.